The observatory door was locked from within. Snow drifted across the parquet in perfect silence. Dr. Elias Van Holt sat upright in his velvet chair, eyes wide, throat opened ear to ear. Yet no blood stained the Persian rug, only a thin rime of frost glittering like diamonds upon the wound. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, the grandfather clock struck 3, though dawn was hours away. Chapter 1. The Sanatorium of Silence. The Grand Hôtel des Neiges Perdues did not welcome visitors, it endured them. Perched on a knife-edge ridge above the Rhone Valley, its Gothic silhouette jutted into the storm like the prow of a sinking ship. Once a sanatorium for the consumptive elite of the Belle Époque, it had been reborn in the 1920s as a discreet retreat for those who wished to disappear temporarily from the world. Diplomats nursing secrets, actresses fleeing scandals, millionaires evading taxes, all paid in gold for the privilege of silence and altitude. Hercule Poirot stepped from the funicular carriage at precisely 1742, his patent leather shoes sinking an inch into the fresh powder. The conductor, a taciturn Swiss with a face like carved granite, handed down Poirot's valise without a word. The little Belgian adjusted his Homburg, smoothed his moustaches, already beaded with frost, and surveyed the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. The hotel's facade was a study in decay masked by grandeur. Turrets capped with witches' hat roofs, balconies sagging under snow, windows glowing amber against the bruised sky, and above it all, the observatory dome, a copper blister turned verdigris by decades of acid rain, glinting like a malevolent eye. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, exhaling a plume of breath that hung in the air like incense. A palace of ice and isolation, perfect for murder. He had not come for pleasure. A telegram, delivered to his London flat by a trembling maid, had summoned him. Van Holt dead, observatory locked, no blood, blizzard, come at once. Linda, Dr. Elias Van Holt, occult historian, dilettante archaeologist, and self-proclaimed cartographer of the unseen, had been a name in certain circles. Poirot had met him once, at a séance in Brussels. The man's eyes had been too bright, his hands too restless. A mind brilliant but unmoored, like a kite in a gale. The hotel doors, carved oak bound with iron, swung inward before Poirot reached them. Erlinda, the manager, stood framed in the entrance, his bald pate gleaming under the chandelier. He was a man of middling height, with the stooped shoulders of one who had spent decades bowing to the whims of the rich. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, voice trembling like a violin string. "Dieu merci, you are here. The avalanche." He gestured vaguely at the mountains. "The pass is buried. 3 meters of snow, perhaps 4. The telephone lines are down. We are coupé du monde." "Cut off from the world," Poirot translated, stepping into the foyer. The warmth hit him like a slap. Pine logs crackling in a hearth the size of a small carriage. "And Dr. Van Holt?" Linda's face crumpled. "In the observatory, this morning. The maid, Greta. She brought his coffee at 8. The door was locked. She knocked, no answer, she fetched me. We broke in." His voice dropped to a whisper. He was assis. In his chair, throat, he mimed a slash across his own neck, then crossed himself. Poirot removed his gloves, finger by finger. "Show me." But first, the guests. Linda led him through the lobby, a cavern of dark wood and Persian rugs, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and bergamot. A grandfather clock ticked with the solemnity of a judge. Portraits of long-dead Habsburgs glared down, their eyes following Poirot as he walked. "The other guests," Linda said, "are in the lounge. There are only 4. The storm deterred the rest. They have been difficiles." Poirot's lips twitched. Murder makes people so. The lounge was a cathedral of velvet and shadow. A fire roared in a hearth carved with alpine ibex. Above the mantel, a taxidermied chamois stared glassily into eternity. The 4 occupants turned as one when Poirot entered. First, Madame Lysandre Crowe, spiritualist medium to the crowned heads of Europe. She reclined on a chaise longue, swathed in violet silk that pooled like spilled wine. Her hair, raven black streaked with silver, was piled high in the style of a Gibson girl. Her eyes, the colour of amethyst, fixed on Poirot with unsettling intensity. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice husky with absinthe and secrets. "The veil is thin here. Can you not feel it?" Second, Captain Roderick Blaine, late of His Majesty's Rifle Brigade. He stood by the window, a tumbler of whisky in one hand, the other clenched at his side. His face was a map of old wounds. Mustard gas had left his skin mottled, his left eye milky. A scar ran from temple to jaw, livid against his tan. "Detective," he barked, "about bloody time. This place is a death trap." Third, Fräulein Ingrid Stahl, Varnholt's secretary. She sat ramrod straight in a wingback chair, her blonde hair braided tightly, her blue eyes as cold as the glacier outside. She wore a charcoal skirt and white blouse, the picture of efficiency, except for the faint bruise blooming on her left wrist, half hidden by her cuff. "You are Belgian," she said in perfect French. "Dr. Varnholt spoke of you. He said you were formidable." Fourth, Professor Otto Klein, archaeologist and Varnholt's rival. He paced before the fire, pince-nez fogged, a brandy snifter trembling in his hand. His beard was unkempt, his suit rumpled as if he'd slept in it. "Poirot!" he snapped. "This is a farce. Varnholt was mad, obsessed with his darkness between stars. He brought this on himself." Poirot bowed to each in turn, his movements precise as a dancer's. "Mesdames, Messieurs, I am Hercule Poirot. I investigate the death of Dr. Varnholt. You will assist me." Blaine snorted. "Assist? I was asleep. So were they. Ask the staff." Linda hovered. The staff, Greta, the cook, the porter, they heard nothing. The observatory is at the end of the east wing. Isolated. Poirot's eyes swept the room. Details, always details. The fire, logs freshly added, yet the room was frigid. A window stood ajar. Snowflakes drifted in, melting on the sill. Inside, the Persian rug, a faint damp patch near the chaise, as if something had been spilled and hastily mopped. Madame Crowe's rings, one missing, the setting empty. Fräulein Stahl's shoes, wet soles, though she claimed to have been in her room. Professor Klein's brandy. The bottle on the sideboard was Macallan 1926, Varnholt's favourite according to the label, half empty. "Tell me," Poirot said, addressing them all, "what was Dr. Varnholt's mood yesterday?" Madame Crowe spoke first. "Agitated. He held a séance the night before last. Claimed to have contacted something. Said it watched him through the telescope." Blaine rolled his eye. "Poppycock. The man was 3 sheets to the wind. Owed me 10,000 francs. Lost at écarté. I was in the billiard room till 2, drowning my sorrows." Fräulein Stahl's voice was flat. "He dictated letters about Carpathian blood rights. He was excited. Said the darkness was close." Klein slammed his glass down. "Lies! He stole my research, a Sumerian star map, accused me of plagiarism. I was in my study all night, translating cuneiform." Poirot listened, his head tilted like a bird's. Liars, all of them, but which lie concealed murder? He turned to Linda. "The body? This way." The east wing corridor was a tunnel of shadows. Gas lamps flickered, casting grotesque silhouettes. Their footsteps echoed. Poirot noted A scuff mark on the baseboard. Fresh. A single blonde hair caught in a door hinge. The smell of almonds. Faint but unmistakable. The observatory door was splintered where the lock had been forced. Inside, chaos and order in equal measure. Star charts pinned to the walls. A brass telescope aimed at the dome's slit. Books, Malleus Maleficarum, The Key of Solomon, a dog-eared copy of Lovecraft's Necronomicon, a hoax Poirot knew, but Van Holt had believed. And in the centre, the chair. Dr. Elias Van Holt sat upright, as if merely dozing. His head lolled slightly, revealing the wound, a single clean slash from ear to ear. The edges were white with frost, no blood, not a drop. The Persian rug beneath was pristine. Poirot knelt. The corpse's eyes were open, pupils dilated. Rigor mortis had set in, the jaw locked, the fingers curled like claws. He touched the cheek, ice cold. Time of death, 6 to 8 hours ago, between midnight and 2 a.m. He examined the wound. Surgical precision, a scalpel? No, too wide. A straight razor, perhaps, but the blood? He lifted the rug. Nothing. The floorboards beneath were dry. Impossible, he whispered. Linda hovered. The window was sealed. The door bolted from within. We found the key inside, on the desk. Poirot stood. The window, double-paned, latched. Ice on the inside, thick as glass. The bolt, heavy iron, no sign of tampering. The key, Yale pattern, no duplicates according to Linda. On the desk, a torn page, ink still wet. When the third moon wanes, the darkness drinks. Below it, a symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line. A cult or a cipher? Poirot sniffed the air. Almonds again, cyanide. But no bitterness on the lips. In the brandy, then? A crystal decanter stood on a side table, half full. A single glass, lipstick on the rim. Not Van Holt's. He turned to Linda. The guests' alibis. Verify them, and the staff. No one leaves the East Wing. As Linda scurried off, Poirot examined the telescope. The lens was aimed at a precise point in the sky. Draco, the dragon constellation. One star was circled in red. He adjusted the focus. Through the eyepiece, the glacier below, a jagged crevasse glowing blue in the moonlight. And on the ice, a silhouette, human-shaped, watching the sanatorium. Poirot did not flinch. Someone is very clever, he murmured, but Hercule Poirot is cleverer. He stepped into the corridor. The blonde hair in the hinge, Fräulein Stahl's, the scuff mark, size 11 boot, Blaine's. The damp patch in the lounge, melted snow from the observatory window, carried on a shoe. From the lounge came the sound of a woman screaming, not in fear, but in ecstasy. The notes hung in the air like shards of glass. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The game, mes amis, has begun. Chapter 2. The Observatory of the Dead Hercule Poirot stood alone in the observatory, the door now unbolted but closed behind him. The corpse of Dr. Elias Van Holt remained seated in its velvet throne, a macabre sentinel. Poirot had dismissed Herr Linda with a flick of gloved fingers. Allez, allez, I work best without an audience. Yet the manager's footsteps had scarcely faded before the little Belgian began his ritual. He circled the room with the meticulous grace of a cat in a creamery. First, the perimeter. The dome's slit was open a hand's breadth, admitting a blade of moonlight that cut across the parquet like a scalpel. Snow had drifted in, forming a perfect white triangle on the floor, untouched by footprints. The window below it, sealed by ice, the latch frozen solid. Poirot pressed a palm to the glass. It did not yield. Impossible to open from outside, impossible to close from within once frost had set. Next, the door, the splintered jamb where the crowbar had bitten. The bolt, heavy iron, thrown from the inside. The key lay on the desk, a Yale with a tag, Observatory. Sole copy. Poirot lifted it between thumb and forefinger, turning it to the light. No duplicate marks, no wax impressions. He slipped it into his waistcoat. Pocket. Now the corpse. Poirot approached Varnholt as one might a sleeping tiger. The dead man's head had fallen forward slightly, the wound gaping like a second lipless mouth. The edges were rimed with hoarfrost, glittering under the gaslight. Poirot leaned close enough to smell the faint bitterness beneath the almonds. Cyanide, yes, but not ingested. The lips were unstained, the tongue pink, not cherry red. In the brandy, then. He lifted the decanter. Crystal, cut in the Bohemian style, half full. The stopper replaced upside down, a careless gesture, or deliberate. He poured a thimbleful into the lipstick-stained glass. The liquid was cloudy, a faint sediment swirling like smoke. Poirot touched it to his tongue, amer, but not fatal in such dilution. The poison had been in the first glass, poured hours ago and discarded. He sniffed the rim. Rouge baiser, Madame Crow's shade. Footsteps in the corridor, light, rapid, heeled boots. The door opened a crack, and Fräulein Ingrid Stahl slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, her breath pluming. "You should not be here, monsieur," she said, but her eyes devoured the room. "Nor should you, Fräulein. Yet here we are." Poirot did not turn. "Tell me, what did Dr. Varnholt study last night?" She hesitated, then crossed to the desk. Her fingers brushed the torn page. "When the third moon wanes, the darkness drinks." "This," she said, "his magnum opus, a treatise on the Leer zwischen den Sternen, the void between stars. He believed it was conscious." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Consciousness requires a mind. A void, by definition, is empty." "Yet he heard it," she insisted, "whispers through the telescope. He said it watched him." Poirot moved to the brass instrument. It was a fine piece, Ross of London, 6-inch objective. The mount was locked at an altitude of 47 degrees, azimuth 312. He peered through the eyepiece. The glacier again, the crevasse, the silhouette, gone. But the lens was warm, as if recently used. He adjusted the focus. A smudge on the glass, grease, perhaps a thumbprint. He produced a silk handkerchief, polished it away. "Tell me, Fräulein, who else has access to this telescope?" "Only Dr. Varnholt. The dome mechanism is temperamental. He oiled it himself." Poirot noted the oil can on the floor. Lid askew, a single drop on the parquet. Fresh. He knelt, touched it, still tacky, used within the hour. The door burst open again. Professor Otto Klein stormed in, brandy sloshing from his glass. "Mein Gott, you are contaminating the scene!" Poirot rose smoothly. "On the contrary, Professor, I'm preserving it. You were saying Dr. Varnholt held séances?" Klein's pince-nez slipped. Ja, foolishness. 2 nights ago, in the lounge. Madame Crow with her planchette board. Varnholt claimed to summon an entity, said it demanded a sacrifice. He laughed, but it cracked like thin ice. "I left at midnight. The man was raving." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you, Professor, what is your interest in the stars?" Klein flushed. "Archaeoastronomy. The Sumerians aligned their ziggurats with Draco. Varnholt stole my star map, claimed it proved his darkness was an ancient god. I was in my study all night, translating cuneiform," Poirot finished. "Yes, you said. Yet your boots, Professor, they are wet, and size 9, I think, not the size 11 that scuffed the corridor." Klein glanced down, startled. A puddle formed beneath his left foot. Melted snow. Fräulein Stahl's eyes flicked to the oil can, then away. Poirot smiled, a small, dangerous smile. "Let us reconstruct, n'est-ce pas? Dr. Varnholt pours brandy, laced with cyanide, At, say, 11:47 p.m., he drinks, he dies. The killer enters after, slits the throat to suggest ritual, stages the locked room. But how? The bolt, the key, the ice. He paced, hands clasped behind his back. The avalanche! Mon Dieu, the avalanche! It began at 11:30, yes? The funicular cables iced over. No one could leave. But someone planned this. The poison prepared in advance. The séance to establish fear. The telescope to suggest a supernatural watcher. He stopped at the star chart on the wall. The constellation Draco, one star circled in red. This star, Thuban, was the pole star in 3000 BC. The Sumerians called it the Dragon's Eye. Your map, Professor? Klein nodded stiffly. Poirot tapped the chart. But here, someone has scratched out a second star. Why? Fräulein Stahl spoke softly. Dr. Varnholt said it was moving against the laws of astronomy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A moving star, or a moving lantern? A magic lantern, perhaps, projected onto the glacier to create your silhouette. He crossed to a ventilation grate high in the wall. It was loose, one screw missing. Behind it, a narrow shaft and the faint smell of burning paraffin. Voila! The darkness has a projector. Klein sputtered. Preposterous! Varnholt was poisoned, Poirot cut in. Then posed. The throat slit post-mortem. Note the lack of blood. The heart had stopped pumping. The killer drained the blood. Where? Ah. He lifted the rug. Beneath, a faint seam in the floorboards. A trapdoor, no larger than a chessboard. He pried it open. A tin basin, frozen blood within, crimson ice. Fräulein Stahl gasped. Poirot closed the trapdoor. The blood was poured down the snowshoot to the glacier. By morning, it will be gone, but the ice preserves evidence, mes amis, and Hercule Poirot preserves the truth. Chapter 3. The Medium's Mirror. Madame Lysandre Crow's suite occupied the entire southwest corner of the second floor, a warren of velvet and candlelight that smelled of myrrh, absinthe, and something metallic. Blood, perhaps, or old coins. Poirot entered without knocking. The door had been left, adjacently open, a deliberate invitation. The medium reclined on a chaise of burgundy damask, one arm draped languidly, the other cradling a crystal goblet half full of chartreuse. Her violet eyes tracked Poirot's reflection in a hand mirror she held angled toward the ceiling. You move like a chess piece, monsieur, she said, voice husky from late nights and laudanum. Always 3 moves ahead. Sit. The spirits dislike standing. Poirot remained upright. I prefer to observe the board from above, madame. Mirrors, I see. Many mirrors. Every wall was lined with them, gilded, smoked, convex, concave, yet each draped in heavy black silk. Only the hand mirror remained uncovered. Poirot's reflection stared back. Immaculate overcoat, moustache waxed to rapier points, eyes bright as winter stars. I see death in reflections, Madame Crow murmured. Last night, after the séance, I saw Dr. Varnholt, after he was dead. He stood behind me, throat smiling red, whispering my name. Poirot's gaze flicked to the phonograph. The record spun, but the tango had ended, the needle now hissed in the run-out groove. He lifted it with a gloved finger. Beneath the stylus, a faint smear of crimson wax, rouge baiser. Tell me of this séance, he said. She rose, silk whispering, and crossed to a rosewood table. Upon it lay a planchette board of polished ebony, letters carved in ivory. 2 nights ago, 10 o'clock, the fire low, all present save the staff. Varnholt insisted. He brought the darkness text, bound in sharkskin, pages edged in gold. He read an invocation in Akkadian. The planchette moved. Poirot lifted the board. Light, almost weightless. The underside, a thin layer of fresh glue, still tacky. Someone had affixed a hidden magnet. He scraped it with a fingernail. Iron filings clung. "Spirit writing?" he asked mildly. "See for yourself." She produced a sheet of onion skin, scrawled in violet ink, DARKNESS, HUNGERS. The letters were uneven, childlike. Poirot sniffed the paper. Almonds, faint but present. Cyanide ink? No, cyanide solution used to age the paper artificially. He folded it into his pocket. The door opened. Captain Blaine filled the frame, whiskey on his breath, revolver bulging at his hip. "This is bloody nonsense," he barked. "Varnholt owed me 10,000 francs. I was in the billiard room till 2, practicing solitary cannon. Ask the cue boy." "There is no cue boy," Poirot said. "The storm sent the staff home. You were alone." Blaine's scarred face darkened. "Then ask the balls. I re-racked them at midnight. They'll show the breaks." Poirot made a mental note. Billiard balls, ivory, heavy. Excellent for testing timelines. Madame Crowe glided to a tall mirror and drew back the veil. The glass was antique, silver backing mottled with age. Poirot's reflection appeared, then blinked a fraction late. "Mon Dieu," he whispered. "Not a trick of the light," she said. "The veil is thin. Watch." She passed her hand across the glass. The reflection did not follow. Instead, it lifted a hand that was not Poirot's, long, pale, the fingers stained with ink. Poirot did not flinch. He stepped closer. The reflection smiled, a smile he had never made. Then it vanished, leaving only darkness in the glass. "Projection," he said softly. "A magic lantern behind the mirror. Clever." He tapped the frame. Hollow. A concealed panel slid aside at his touch, revealing a small episcope projector, its lens aimed through a pinhole. A glass slide lay beside it, a photographic negative of a hand. Madame Crowe's composure cracked. I keep it for effect. The guests expect theatre." "Yet someone used it last night," Poirot said, "after Varnholt was dead, to convince the others the curse was real." Blaine snorted. "I saw nothing. I was drugged," Poirot finished. He produced a morphine ampule from Blaine's own coat pocket. Empty. "You keep these for the pain, n'est-ce pas? Someone added a second dose to your flask. You slept like a child." Blaine's hand went to his revolver. Poirot continued, unperturbed. "Fräulein Stahl claims she typed letters until 1. Professor Klein translates cuneiform by candlelight. Madame Crowe communes with the dead. All impeccable alibis, until 1 examines the details." He crossed to a wastebasket. Inside, a torn photograph. He pieced it together on the table. Varnholt and Madame Crowe younger, arms entwined in a Berlin nightclub, 1923. On the back in faded ink, "Forgive me, Lysandra, the child was not yours to keep." Madame Crowe's hand flew to her throat. "Where did you—" "From the chapel grate," Poirot said. "You burned the rest, but fire is unreliable. Tell me about the child." Her eyes filled. "A daughter, born in 24. Varnholt took her, said she was marked by the darkness. I never saw her again." Poirot's voice softened, but only slightly. "So you poisoned him for revenge?" "No." She seized the planchette board, fingers trembling. "Watch! I will prove it." She placed her hands on the planchette. It moved, slowly at first, then with violence, letters spelled Liar. Poirot watched her pupils, dilated, laudanum. The board was guided, by her own subconscious perhaps. He lifted the planchette. Beneath, a second magnet stronger. Someone had swapped them. "Enough theatre," he said. "The darkness is human, and it bleeds." Chapter 4. The Captain's War Captain. Roderick Blaine's room was a fortress of empire in miniature. Regimental colours hung from the rafters. A framed map of Passchendaele bore red pins like drops of blood. On the nightstand, a Webley Mach-6 revolver, 6 rounds in the cylinder, hammer filed smooth for speed. Morphine ampules glinted in a leather case. A half-empty bottle of Glenmorangie sweated beside a cracked photograph. Blaine and Varnholt, 1916 arms slung, around each other in a Flanders trench, both impossibly young. Poirot entered without ceremony. Blaine stood at the window, back rigid, staring at the glacier as though it were the German line. Snow lashed the glass in frantic Morse. "You've come to accuse me, then," Blaine said without turning. His voice was gravel over broken glass. "Get on with it." "Accusations are for juries, Capitaine," Poirot replied. "I collect facts. You fought at Passchendaele. You saw men freeze with their eyes open. Tell me, did Dr. Varnholt ever desert?" Blaine spun, face livid. "He sold letters to a rag in Berlin, claimed I ran. I crawled through mud for 3 days to bring back my sergeant's body. Varnholt wanted the money for his damned occult library." He gestured at the photograph. "We were friends once, brothers." Poirot lifted the frame. On the back, in faded pencil, "To Roddy, may the darkness never find us, E.V." He set it down gently. "Yet you played cards with him 3 nights ago, écarté. He won 10,000 francs. "Borrowed," Blaine spat. "He promised repayment by telegram, never came." He opened a drawer, produced a promissory note. Varnholt's flamboyant signature, ink still blue. "I was in the billiard room till 2, practicing solitary cannon. The balls will prove it." Poirot's eyes flicked to Blaine's boots by the door. Size 11, hobnailed, soles caked with fresh snow. Not the polished Oxfords he'd worn at dinner. He knelt, scraped a sample into an envelope. "You changed boots after midnight. Slipped on the terrace. Needed air." Blaine's hand strayed to the Webley. Poirot straightened. "Air, or an alibi. The terrace door was bolted from within. The porter swears it." Blaine's scarred eye twitched. "Then the porter lies. Or you climbed the drainpipe, like Ypres, n'est-ce pas, when you rescued Lieutenant Harrow from the wire." Poirot produced a torn scrap of khaki wool from his pocket, caught on the pipe outside the observatory window, 30 feet up. "Your coat, I think." Blaine lunged for the revolver. Poirot was faster. His cane hooked the captain's ankle, sending him sprawling. The Webley skittered across the rug. Poirot pinned it with his foot. "Violence is the refuge of the guilty mind," he said mildly. "But you are not the killer, mon ami, merely the pawn." He helped Blaine up. The captain's breath reeked of whiskey and despair. "Pawn? Varnholt ruined me. My pension, gone. My name." "Your name is safe," Poirot said, "because you were drugged. 2 ampules missing from your case. Someone knew your weakness." He indicated the Glenmorangie. "They added the morphine to your flask. You slept like the dead while the real murderer worked." Blaine stared at the bottle, horror dawning. Christ! Poirot moved to the wardrobe. Inside, a dress uniform, medals tarnished. Beneath it, a hidden compartment. He opened it with a click. Inside, a straight razor in a velvet sheath, blade honed to a whisper, handle mother of pearl. A single blonde hair caught in the hinge. "Yours?" Poirot asked. Blaine shook his head. "Never seen it." Poirot wrapped it in silk. "Then it belongs to someone who borrows your room. Someone who knows your habits." A knock. Fräulein Stahl entered, carrying a silver tray. Coffee, brioche, a single red apple sliced into perfect moons. Her eyes flicked to the razor, then away. "Breakfast, Herr Capitaine," she said. "Cook thought you might need it." She set the tray down. The knife beside the apple. Carbon steel, 6 inches. Edge nicked in the exact pattern of Varnholt's wound. Poirot lifted it. You slice apples with a butcher's knife, Fräulein." She smiled, icy. "The kitchen was busy. I improvised." Blaine stared at her as though seeing a ghost. "You were Varnholt's typist. He dictated filth, blood rights. You typed it all." "I typed what he paid me to type," she said. "He was insistent." She rolled up her sleeve. Bruises ringed her wrist, fingerprints deep and purple. "He liked to hold the pen himself." Poirot's voice was soft. "And you liked to hold the knife?" She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "If I'd killed him, monsieur, I'd have used his own scalpel. From the observatory drawer. He kept it for rituals." Poirot's eyes narrowed. He'd missed the scalpel, careless. He made a note to return. Blaine sank onto the bed. "I thought it was the curse, the darkness. After the séance, I saw shapes on the glacier." "Shapes created by a magic lantern," Poirot said, "projected from the ventilator shaft. Madame Crow's toy, but someone else's weapon." He turned to Stahl. "You were in the kitchen at 1:15 a.m. The cook saw you. Yet your shoes, wet, from the observatory." "I fetched brandy," she said. "Dr. Varnholt requested it. He was agitated." Poirot lifted the coffee pot. Inside, a faint almond scent. He poured a drop into a saucer, touched it to his tongue. Cyanide, diluted but present. "This brandy," she paled. I don't know. The decanter was already open." Poirot set the pot down. "Then we have a problem. The decanter in the observatory was sealed when I arrived. Cork intact. Someone opened it after death." Chapter 5. The Professor's Folio. The match trembled in Poirot's gloved hand, casting a halo of gold across the carnage. Captain Blaine lay on his back, eyes wide to the ceiling, a neat circular hole above his left eyebrow. No exit wound, small caliber, close range. The Webley was gone from the rug. In its place, the mother-of-pearl razor, unstained. Fräulein Stahl stood frozen by the tray, apple slices scattered like white petals in the dark. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "The killer returns to the scene." He knelt, shielding the match with his body. Blaine's hand still clutched the promissory. Note, crumpled now, a corner soaked red. Poirot pried it free. On the reverse, fresh ink. "The darkness collects its debts." The handwriting, Varnholt's. Stahl's voice cracked. He was alive a second ago." "Alive enough to write?" Poirot rose, match guttering. "No, this was placed, a tableau." He sniffed the wound. Gunpowder, sharp and acrid. 22 caliber, not the Webley, a lady's pistol perhaps. The lights flickered, then blazed. Herr Linder burst in, face the colour of putty. "Mein Gott! The generator, it failed! I fixed—" He saw the body and retched. Poirot ignored him. "Fräulein, the coffee. You brought it at 8:17. The cook confirms. Yet cyanide in the pot. Who poured?" "I did," she said, steady now. "But the pot was clean, I swear it." Poirot lifted the apple knife. A single blonde hair, hers, caught in the handle. "And this knife, you carried it from the kitchen. But the wound on Varnholt, nicked edge. This blade is smooth." She stared at her hair, then at Blaine. I don't understand. Understanding is my métier." Poirot turned to Linda. "The professor, find him, now." Linda scurried off. Poirot examined the window. Latched, no footprints on the sill. The door, locked from within when they entered. He checked the key in the lock, turned from the outside. Someone had a duplicate. He moved to the wardrobe. The hidden compartment was open, the razor gone. In its place, a brass key, identical to the observatory's. Poirot pocketed it. Footsteps thundered. Professor Klein arrived, panting, brandy flask clutched like a talisman. "What in Hades?" "Murder," Poirot said. "Your turn, Herr Professor. You claim to be translating cuneiform all night. Yet your boots, wet again, and your hands?" He seized Klein's wrist. Ink stains. Violet, like Madame Crow's. You write with a fountain pen. Waterman, 1925. The note on Blaine's body, same nib. Klein jerked free. Coincidence. I was in my study, forging star maps. Poirot produced the torn page from the observatory. This symbol, the circle bisected. Sumerian? No, a ventilation plan. The shaft from the observatory to the chapel. You projected the darkness silhouette from there. Klein's pince-nez slipped. Varnholt stole my research. A tablet, real cuneiform, proving the darkness was a meteor cult. He wanted fame. I had to stop him. By murder. Poirot's voice was silk over steel. You watched him die, then staged the ritual. But Blaine, he knew. Klein laughed, bitter. Blaine? The fool thought it was ghosts. Varnholt promised him the money was in Berlin. A lie. I told Blaine the truth last night. He confronted Varnholt. They argued. I heard them. Poirot's eyes narrowed. At what time? 11:30, before the avalanche. The avalanche. Poirot remembered. 11:30 p.m., the funicular cables iced. The timing was tight. Moved to the fireplace. Ashes, fresh. He raked them with the poker. A fragment of burnt paper. Forgive me, Otto. The tablet is yours. E.V. Klein paled. He was returning it? After death. Poirot shook his head. No, this was written before. You burned the rest. But why kill Blaine? He was drunk, raving, said he'd go to the police when the pass cleared. I couldn't risk it. Stahl stepped forward. You shot him. Klein's hand went to his coat. Poirot was faster. His cane cracked across Klein's knuckles. A derringer clattered out, two-shot, pearl handle. One round fired. Voila, Poirot said. The lady's pistol, but not yours, Professor. The grip, too small, and the bullets wax-tipped, for the magic lantern show. He picked up the gun, the second barrel loaded. He aimed it at Klein. You are under arrest. Klein lunged for the door. Stahl blocked him, apple knife flashing. 9! You will not run! Poirot lowered the derringer. Brava, Fräulein! But the knife! Put it down! The killer is not the professor. He turned to the wardrobe. The hidden compartment, deeper than it seemed. He reached inside, fingers brushing canvas. He pulled out a folio, leather-bound, heavy. Inside, star maps, cuneiform rubbings, and a photograph. Varnholt and a child, blonde, blue-eyed, perhaps 6 years old. On the back, Ingrid, 1927. The darkness sees through her eyes. Stahl gasped. That's me. Poirot nodded. Your daughter, Madame Crow. No, yours, Fräulein. Varnholt took her. Raised her as his own. The bruises on your wrist, his. The swastika pin in your room, Gestapo. You were sent to retrieve artifacts. He blackmailed you with the child. Klein stared. You knew? I suspected. Poirot opened the folio fully. Beneath the maps, a false bottom. Inside, a glass vial, cyanide crystals, and a journal. Last entry. Ingrid comes tonight. She will pay. The darkness hungers. Stahl's face crumpled. I poisoned the brandy to free my daughter. But when I arrived, he was already dead. I slit the throat to make it look like the curse. Poirot closed the folio. And Blaine. I shot him, she whispered. He saw me leave the observatory, threatened to expose me. I took the derringer from Madame Crow's drawer. She keeps it for protection. Klein laughed maniacally. All of us. Pawns. Chapter 6. The secretary's secret Poirot stamped out the last ember with the heel of his patent shoe, the acrid scent of singed leather mingling with blood and candle smoke. The photograph lay curled in his palm. Half the child's face melted away, the remaining eye staring up with Ingrid Stahl's own glacial blue. Assez, he said quietly. The theatre ends here. Fräulein Stahl stood rooted, the apple knife still in her hand, knuckles white. Professor Klein slumped against the wall, Derringer at his feet, muttering Sumerian curses under his breath. Herr Linde hovered in the doorway, wringing his hands as though they might come clean of guilt. Poirot addressed Stahl in the tone of a schoolmaster correcting a wayward pupil. "You have confessed to the poison and the staging, ja? But not to the shot that killed Captain Blaine. That was panic, not plan. And the child," he held up the ruined photograph. "Where is she?" Stahl's voice was a thread. "I never had a child. Varnholt said I did. A lie to control me." Poirot's moustache bristled. "Then whose face is this?" He turned the photograph to Klein. The professor's eyes widened behind cracked pince-nez. "Mein Gott, that is my niece, Greta's daughter. She vanished in 27. Varnholt, he took her for his experiments." Linde made a strangled sound. "Greta, the maid, she has been with us since the child disappeared," Poirot finished. "And Greta brings coffee to the observatory every morning. She would have seen the body first. Yet she said nothing until you broke the door." He strode to the dumbwaiter shaft, a narrow wooden box no wider than a coffin. The rope was frayed. A fresh smear of blood traced the pulley. Poirot shone his pocket torch upward. 30 feet above, the shaft opened into the chapel loft. A child-sized footprint in dust led to the edge. "Mon Dieu, the darkness has been watching from the rafters." He turned to Stahl. "Your room, Fräulein. Maintenant." They marched in silence through corridors where gas jets hissed like serpents. Stahl's door was ajar. Inside, Spartan order. A typewriter on a walnut desk. A single bed with hospital corners. A hymnal on the nightstand, open to Psalm 23. Poirot lifted it. Tucked between pages, a silver swastika pin, enamel-chipped, Gestapo issue, 1932. "You are Abwehr," he said, not a question. She did not deny it. "Cultural attaché. Varnholt smuggled artifacts. Jewish Torahs, Babylonian seals. Berlin wanted them. He demanded favors." She rolled her sleeve again. The bruises had darkened to plum. "I refused. He showed me the photograph. Said the child was mine. Taken at birth. Raised in secrecy. I believed him." Poirot opened the wardrobe. Inside, a grey wool coat, pockets heavy. He withdrew a Leica camera, film canister labelled Observatory, 3 a.m. and a glass vial, empty, residue of cyanide crystals. "You photographed the scene after death," Poirot said, "for your handlers, but the throat slit, your addition, to make it a cult, to frighten the others into silence." Stahl's composure cracked. "I had to. If Berlin thought I failed, they would shoot you," Poirot finished. "Yet you hesitated. The blood in the basin. You drained it yourself, poured it down the snow chute, but the floor slopes. A puddle remained beneath the rug. I found it." He knelt, lifted the rug. Frozen crimson, yes, but also a second stain. Smaller, lipstick, rouge baiser. "Madame, Crow was here," he murmured. "She saw you." Stahl shook her head. "Impossible. She was burning letters in the chapel." "Letters you gave her," Poirot countered, "to destroy evidence of the child, but one fragment survived." He produced the burnt scrap from Chapter 4. "The child was... She kept the rest, for leverage." Klein recovered, snarled from the doorway. "You are all mad. The darkness is real. I saw it in the telescope." "A dummy on skis," Poirot said. "Your coat, Professor. The silhouette. You frightened the guests to cover your theft of the tablet. But the tablet is gone. Varnholt mailed it to London before he died." He produced a telegram from his waistcoat. Intercepted by Linde that morning. "Tablet safe. Christie's auction. 15th. V." Klein lunged. Poirot sidestepped. The professor crashed into the desk, scattering typewriter keys like hail. Stahl seized the moment. She bolted for the window, flung it open. Blizzard roared in, snow stinging like buckshot. 30 feet below, the glacier, blue and hungry. Poirot's cane hooked her ankle. She fell, knife skittering across the sill. "Non, Fräulein. The ice preserves evidence, and corpses." He helped her up. Her face was wet. Tears or melted snow, impossible to tell. "The child," she whispered. "If she exists." "She does," Poirot said, "and she is here." He led them to the chapel. The crucifix hung crooked, eyes bleeding rust. Poirot climbed the pulpit, pushed aside a velvet curtain. Behind, a crawl space. Inside, a nest of blankets, a candle stub, a child's drawing, crayon stars, a stick figure with a slashed throat. Footsteps. Greta the maid appeared, face streaked with flour and fear. In her arms, a girl, 6 years old, blonde as Stahl, eyes wide. "Mutti?" the child asked, reaching for Stahl. Stahl sobbed, fell to her knees. "Liesel!" Greta's voice was steel. "He told her you were dead. Said the darkness took you. I kept her hidden, fed her scraps. She saw everything through the vents." Poirot knelt beside the child. "You wrote on the journal page, yeah? With berry juice." Liesel nodded. "The bad man hurt Uncle Roderick. I wanted to help." Poirot's heart twisted. "You did, Petite. You did." Chapter 7. The Avalanche of Lies. Poirot's torch beams stabbed upward. Dust motes danced like fireflies. The crawl space was empty, blankets flattened, crayon drawing gone. Greta clutched Liesel to her chest. The girl's eyes were rolled back, whites only. Stahl reached for her daughter, but Poirot barred the way with his cane. "Personne ne bouge," he ordered. "The darkness plays its final act." He climbed the pulpit steps 2 at a time, surprisingly nimble for a man who affected delicacy. The rafters were a lattice of ancient beams, slick with frost. A rope ladder dangled from a trapdoor in the ceiling, new hemp, still fragrant. Poirot hauled himself up. The loft opened into the bell tower. Wind screamed through broken louvers. On the floor, a child's shoe, sole crusted with dried blood. And a tripod, brass, collapsible. A magic lantern, lens cracked. Footprints in the dust, small, bare. They led to a ventilation grate overlooking the observatory dome 30 feet below. Through it, a perfect view of Van Holt's corpse. Poirot descended. The child watched everything, but someone used her eyes. He faced the group, Stahl, Greta, Klein, Linda, faces lit by torchlight like masks in a commedia dell'arte. "Écoutez bien," he began. "Dr. Van Holt died at 11:47 p.m. Before the séance, Madame Crowe claims summoned his spirit. The grandfather clock in the lounge was stopped at 3 a.m. to mislead. The avalanche began at 11:30, planned. The funicular cables were sabotaged with acid. Someone wanted us trapped." He produced the brass key from Chapter 5. Duplicate, made from a wax impression in the observatory lock. The bolt was thrown after death, by someone who entered through the dumbwaiter shaft. Stahl's breath hitched. I used the shaft to pour the blood." "Oui, but you were not alone." Poirot turned to Klein. "You projected the silhouette from the chapel loft at 2:15 a.m. Your coat, a dummy on skis, to frighten Blaine into silence." Klein sneered. He was a liability. Poirot ignored him. Madame Crowe provided the magic lantern slides. She burned letters to hide the child's existence, but the crucifix, he pointed to the bleeding Christ, paint, red ochre mixed with glycerin, a child's prank or a distraction. Greta spoke, voice trembling. "Liesel saw the bad man argue with Dr. Van Holt through the grate. She drew it." She produced the crayon sketch. 2 stick figures, one with a knife, one with a gun. The knife figure wore a swastika. Stahl paled. "That's me." "Non, Poirot said. "The swastika is backwards, a mirror image drawn by someone watching you." He strode to the altar. The marble message had vanished, but beneath the puddle, a glass slide. He held it to the torch. A negative. Stahl poisoning the brandy, photographed from above. Voila! The child was the camera. Linda gasped. "Greta!" Greta shook her head violently. "I kept Liesel hidden. She escaped sometimes. Varnholt, he taught her to draw, said it was a game." Poirot knelt before the child. Liesel's eyes fluttered open. "The bad man gave me sweets," she whispered. "Said to watch Mutti, take pictures." Stahl sobbed. "Who?" The chapel door creaked. Madame Crow entered. Violet silk torn, absinthe on her breath. "The child is mine," she said. "Varnholt stole her from me in 27. I came to take her back." Poirot rose. "You are Liesel's mother?" Crow laughed, brittle. "I birthed her in a Berlin clinic. Varnholt paid the nuns, said she was marked, a third nipple, shaped like a star. He wanted her for rituals." She lifted her sleeve. "A scar, surgical, old. I tracked him here. The séance was my cover." Poirot's mind raced. The lipstick on the brandy glass, the projector, the child's drawings. "You drugged Blaine to silence him." "He recognized me," Crow said. "From Berlin. He was there when Varnholt took the baby. I shot him with my derringer, then framed the Gestapo girl." Stahl lunged. Greta blocked her, knife flashing. Poirot's cane cracked across Crow's wrist. The medium dropped a small pistol. Pearl handle, one round fired. "Assez!" Poirot snapped. "The avalanche of lies ends. Dr. Varnholt poisoned himself." Silence fell, thick as snow. The cyanide was in his flask. He drank at 11:47, believing it absolution, part of his ritual. The throat slit was post-mortem by Fräulein Stahl to stage the curse. The blood drained by Greta to protect the child. The silhouette by Klein to steal the tablet. The projector by Madame Crow to reclaim her daughter. Blaine was collateral, drugged, then shot when he remembered. He produced the Macallan bottle from the lounge. Varnholt's favourite. Cork replaced upside down. His habit, the sediment cyanide crystals dissolved over weeks. He planned his suicide to frame the darkness, but you all improved upon it. Crow laughed maniacally. "Then we're all guilty." "No," Poirot said, "only of fear. The true darkness was Varnholt's madness, and your willingness to believe it." Chapter 8. The Darkness Speaks Poirot did not flinch as the shadow dissolved. He stepped forward, cane tapping once, tap on the marble. The sound echoed like a judge's gavel. Liesel's scream choked off. Her bleeding eyes cleared to blue innocence. The temperature rose as suddenly as it had fallen. "A trick, always a trick." "Assez de comédie," he said, voice calm as a frozen lake. "The darkness speaks with wires and mirrors." He knelt among the crucifix shards. Beneath one, a thin copper filament, humming faintly. He traced it with a gloved finger, up the altar behind the reredos, into a mouse hole no wider than a coin. From his pocket he drew a silver cigarette case. Inside, not cigarettes, but tools. Tiny pliers. He snipped the wire. The humming died. Madame Crow laughed. "Hi, unhinged. You think it's mechanical?" "Varnholt spoke to it, through the telescope. It answered." Poirot rose. "It answered with a gramophone needle." He produced a wax cylinder from his waistcoat. Scratched label, "Varnholt Invocation, 3 a.m. Recorded in the observatory 2 nights ago. Played through the ventilation shaft on a clockwork mechanism. The voice was his own, distorted by echo. Greta clutched Liesel tighter. He made the child listen. Said it was bedtime stories. Poirot's eyes softened for the girl, then hardened on Crow. "You used the recording to terrorize, to drive the others to confession, but the shadow—" He pointed to the rafters. a silhouette on a wire, pulled by a child's hand. "Liesel, ma petite, you pulled the string." The girl nodded, trembling. "The lady gave me candy. Said it was a game. Make the shadow dance." Crow's face twisted. "She's mine. Varnholt stole her. I came to take her back." Stahl stepped forward, fists clenched. "You shot Blaine, framed me." "Collateral," Crow spat. "He remembered the clinic, the nuns. He would have talked." Klein, forgotten in the corner, stirred. "And the tablet. My life's work. Mailed to Christie's," Poirot said. "Varnholt's last joke. He knew you all circled like vultures. The suicide was his revenge. He poisoned himself, staged the locked room, left clues to point at each of you. The torn page, the stopped clock, the bloodless wound, a puzzle for Poirot." He turned to Linda. "The acid on the funicular cables, your storeroom, you knew." Linda's bald parté glistened with sweat. "He paid me. Said it was for science, to isolate the experiment." Poirot's cane cracked across Linda's shin. The manager howled. "You isolated murder!" He gathered them in a semicircle. Crow, Stahl, Klein, Greta, Linda. Liesel hid behind her maid's skirts. "Écoutez, Varnholt's death, 11:47 p.m., self-administered cyanide in brandy, throat slit post-mortem by Fräulein Stahl, ritual staging, blood drained by Greta, protection, silhouette by Klein, distraction, projector by Madame Crow, terror. Blaine shot by Crow. Silence, the darkness, a collaboration of fear. He produced the Macallan bottle. The cork upside down, Varnholt's habit, the sediment, cyanide crystals, dissolved over months. He planned this for years. Crow lunged, claws out. "He was a monster. The child is safe," Poirot said. He caught her wrist, twisted. A hidden stiletto clattered to the floor, blade etched with the bisected circle. "Your final trick, but the ice preserves evidence." He knelt again, lifted a flagstone. Beneath, a tin box. Inside, Varnholt's suicide note, written in his own blood, pricked finger, hours before death. "To all who covered the darkness, it is empty. I drink to prove it. Forgive me, Lysandra. The child was never yours. She is the void." Crow read it, face crumpling. "He lied about everything." Poirot closed the box. "The greatest trick. He convinced you all the darkness was real. You killed for a shadow." Stahl's voice was small. "And Blaine remembered the clinic," Poirot said. "Crow shot him with the derringer, then planted the razor to frame you, but the bullet—" He produced the wax-tipped round from the derringer. "For the projector, to make the shadow bleed light." Klein laughed, bitter. "So we are innocent?" "No," Poirot said. "Accessories after the fact. The Swiss police will decide." He turned to the chapel door. Outside, dawn bled pink across the glacier. The avalanche had shifted in the night. A narrow path glinted. Rescue. Chapter 9. The Thor Poirot's torch beam swept the door. The bolt was iron, old, but the scrape marks were fresh. Inside the keyhole, someone had locked them in. He knelt, produced his lockpicks, 3 slim tools that glinted like surgeon steel. 30 seconds, click, the bolt slid back. He pushed, the door opened a finger's breadth, then slammed shut again, wind pressure. The storm had returned, fiercer. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "the mountain itself conspires." Liesel whimpered. The black ichor from her eyes had stopped, leaving streaks like ink on porcelain. Greta wiped them with her apron, whispering lullabies in Schweizerdeutsch. Stahl stood apart, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the child as though she were a ghost. Poirot addressed them all. "The telescope moves on a counterweight. Someone is in the observatory, now." He led the way, torch beam cutting the corridor. The gas jets had failed again, The hotel was a tomb of shadows. They passed Blaine's room, door ajar, blood frozen in a black mirror on the parquet. The Webley lay where it had fallen, hammer-cocked. Poirot pocketed it. The observatory door hung splintered on its hinges. Inside, chaos. The telescope had slewed 180 degrees, lens now aimed inside the dome, at the chair where Van Holt's corpse had sat. The body was gone. Only the velvet cushion remained, indented, a single blonde hair curled like a question mark. Crow laughed. Shattered glass. "He walks! The darkness walks on wires!" Poirot snapped. He pointed to the ceiling. A trapdoor in the dome, newly oiled, swung open. A rope ladder dangled. Above, the mechanism room, gears, pulleys, a gramophone horn. He climbed. The others followed, Stahl first, then Greta with Liesel, Klein muttering, Crow last, stiletto retrieved and hidden in her sleeve. Linda brought up the rear, whimpering. The mechanism room was a clockmaker's nightmare. Brass gears the size of cartwheels, a counterweight of lead. A wax cylinder spun on a turntable, needle scratching Van Holt's voice. "The sacrifice!" Poirot lifted the needle. Silence. On the floor, a child's footprint in oil. And a dummy. Van Holt's coat stuffed with straw, throat slit with red paint. Wires ran from its limbs to the telescope mount. Someone had puppeteered the corpse from the chair, then removed it. "Voilà," Poirot said. "The final performance." Stahl's voice was raw. "Who?" Poirot knelt by the dummy. In the straw, a swastika pin, hers. "You left this as a signature, Fräulein, but the pin is bent. Someone planted it." He stood. "The killer is among us, and they want the child." Liesel pointed to a ventilation grate. "The bad man went there." The grate led to the snow chute, the same that had taken Van Holt's blood. Poirot shone his torch. Footprints, small, bare, led downward, then vanished into the blizzard. They descended the rope ladder to the observatory floor. The dome slit had frozen shut. Ice cracked as Poirot forced it with his cane. Wind screamed in, snow blinding. 30 feet below, the glacier, a blue moor. A rope bridge, new, swaying, spanned the crevasse to a secondary funicular station, half buried but intact. Rescue flares arced in the distance, red, then green, the Swiss police. Poirot turned. The killer flees with the child's drawings, the evidence. Crow lunged for Liesel. Greta blocked her. Stahl seized Crow's arm, twisted. The stiletto clattered. Klein made a break for the rope bridge. Poirot's cane tripped him. He fell hard, pince-nez shattering. "The tablet!" he shrieked. "It's mine!" Linda cowered. I only wanted the hotel safe." Poirot ignored them. He knelt by the snowshoot. A trail of blood, fresh. He followed it to a tin basin, overturned. Inside, Van Holt's corpse, folded like a marionette, throat slit anew. This time arterial spray frozen mid-arc. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. The killer returned to perfect the ritual. He examined the wound. The nick, exact match to the apple knife. But the knife was in Stahl's pocket. He checked. Gone. Stahl's eyes widened. I didn't!" Greta screamed. Liesel was gone. They ran to the rope bridge. The child's footprints led across, then stopped. A single crayon drawing fluttered in the wind, the stick figure with the slashed throat now wearing Poirot's moustache. Crow laughed until she cried. "He knew you'd come, Poirot. The darkness chose you." Poirot's face was granite. "The darkness is a coward. It hides behind children and wires." He stepped onto the bridge. It swayed, ropes creaking. Halfway across, a figure waited, small, hooded, holding Liesel by the hand. The hood fell back. Greta's face, but wrong. Eyes black, mouth smiling too wide. Mutti, Liesel asked. Greta's voice was Varnholt's. The third moon wanes. Poirot raised the Webley. Assay. The performance ends. He fired once. The figure staggered. The hood fell further. Not Greta. A dummy. Greta's apron stuffed with snow. Liesel stood alone, confused. The real Greta screamed from the observatory. Liesel! The child ran to her. Poirot caught her, passed her back. The bridge groaned, then snapped. The dummy plunged into the crevasse, wires trailing like entrails. Chapter 10. The Little Grey Cells. Poirot stood on the broken bridge's edge, Webley smoking in his gloved hand. The dummy lay shattered in the crevasse, Greta's apron fluttering like a surrender flag. Liesel clung to the real Greta's skirts, sobbing. Stahl knelt, arms open. The child ran to her, mother and daughter, truth at last. Crow laughed no more. She sat on the observatory floor, violet silk torn, absinthe flask empty. Klein nursed his shattered pince-nez, muttering about tablets and tenure. Linda wrung his hands until the skin split. Poirot holstered the revolver. Mes amis, the curtain falls. He led them back inside. The dome slit had thawed. Pale dawn poured through like forgiveness. Varnholt's corpse lay where the killer had folded it, tin basin overturned, blood frozen in perfect arcs. Poirot knelt, lifted the apple knife from the dead hand, the nick exact, but the handle, wrapped in blonde hair, Stahl's. He turned to her. You returned, Fräulein, after the bridge, to complete the ritual. Stahl's face was stone. I had to. He still held her. She nodded at Liesel. Even dead. Poirot shook his head. Non. You slit the throat again, to hide the first wound. The cyanide was your addition. Varnholt planned suicide, yes, but with laudanum, slow, dignified. You swapped the flask for cyanide, to make it swift, to frame the curse. He produced the Macallan bottle. The sediment, crystals, added after the cork was replaced upside down. Your fingerprint in the wax. Stahl's eyes filled. He blackmailed me. The artifacts, the child. I thought if he died by the darkness, Berlin would believe the curse. Poirot finished, and you would be free. Greta spoke, voice raw. I drained the blood to protect Liesel. She saw everything. Klein snarled, and I projected the shadow to steal the tablet. Crow whispered, I shot Blaine to silence him. Linda whimpered, I cut the cables for the money. Poirot raised a hand. Silence. You are all accessories, but the architect, he turned to the telescope, was Varnholt himself. He climbed the mechanism room again. The wax cylinder spun its last groove. Poirot lifted it, held it to the light. Beneath the label, a second recording etched in microscopic grooves. He produced a pocket phonograph, collapsible, Swiss-made. He played it, Varnholt's voice, faint but clear. If you hear this, Poirot, I am dead by my own hand. The others will confess their petty crimes. Let them. The darkness is a mirror. It shows what men already are. Forgive them, and forgive me. The needle lifted. Silence. Poirot descended. He knew you all, your fears, your greeds. He staged the locked room, the bloodless wound, the moving telescope. He invited your improvements, the perfect suicide, framed as murder, solved by Poirot. He faced them. Fräulein Stahl poisoned the brandy, accelerating death. Greta drained the blood, hiding the child. Klein projected the silhouette, stealing credit. Madame Crow shot Blaine, silencing the past. Herr Linda cut the cables, isolation, but the throat slit, post-mortem, by Stahl, to sell the curse. Stahl wept. I only wanted her safe. Poirot's voice softened. You have her now. The funicular arrived. Swiss police, ropes, rifles. They took statements. Stahl surrendered the swastika pin. Crow the derringer. Klein the projector slides. Linda the acid vial. Greta, the child's drawings. Poirot stood on the terrace as the Ishum storm cleared. The glacier gleamed like polished steel. He lit a cigarette, his first in days, inhaled the smoke like incense. Liesel approached, holding Stoll's hand. "Monsieur Poirot, is the darkness gone?" He knelt, tweaked her nose. "The darkness, ma petite, is a story we tell ourselves when we are afraid. You are safe," she smiled, sunrise in miniature. Resolution. The police led them away, Stoll in cuffs, but Liesel at her side. Crow, head high. Klein, muttering. Linda, weeping. Greta, free. Poirot remained. He entered the observatory one last time. The telescope stood silent. On the desk, the torn page now complete, taped by his own hand. "When the third moon wanes, the darkness drinks. The blood of the liar. I am the liar, forgive me. E.V." Poirot folded it into his pocket. "Order and method, mon ami. The ice preserves evidence, and the soul reveals itself." He twirled his moustache, boarded the funicular. The hotel shrank behind him. Gothic, haunted, empty. The glacier cracked once more, a farewell.